Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing the game between the Sharks and the Calgary Flames, in which the Sharks won 3-1, their second game against the Flames this season, and their second time winning by this score. That first game was a very impressive goaltending performance, and here tonight was a similar effect, just that first one was with Jones. Tonight was with Arundel. Now, this game actually played out quite similarly to the one the previous night, a few nights ago against the Tampa Bay Lightning. It was the first period where the Sharks were pretty thoroughly outplayed here by the Calgary Flames, but it was their goaltender, Dell, again, who managed to keep them alive and end up going into that first intermission tied at 0. Come second period, the Sharks really did pick up the pace, and while they did give up that first goal to Johnny Gaudreau to make it 1-0 Flames, they answered back rather quickly, I guess, at least in the same period, with both Burns and Evander Kane scoring his 20th goal to lead the team to take a 2-1 lead into the third period. Come third period, again, the Sharks were quite solid. They got a beautiful goal from Kevin Labanc to make it 3-1, and they held the Flames off the scoreboard. While the first period could be mostly attributed to Arundel making some stellar saves, the second and third periods were actually pretty solid defensively for the Sharks, and Dell only had to make a few great saves here or there, which was still very nice to see. With this win, however, it doesn't necessarily have too much of an impact on the playoff position for the Sharks. That still remains quite out of reach. However, the Anaheim Ducks earlier today did beat the Ottawa Senators. They moved ahead of the Sharks in the standings. The Sharks, with this victory, moved back ahead of the Ducks, which doesn't particularly matter in the long run necessarily. However, it'll be nice for the Sharks to finish as well as they can, just so that their lottery pick, when it comes to that, is not that high of a chance of being that first overall pick, because it'll feel very, very bad if the Sharks actually manage to win the lottery. So the lower the chance, the better, at least for our sanity, of course. Now, the first thing to talk about would be Dell. As I said, a stellar game from him. Now 2 games in a row here, going back to that Tampa Bay one, even to 3 games in a row, you could certainly say, going back to that game right out of the All-Star break against the Anaheim Ducks. Dell only letting in a total of 5 goals in those 3 games, and those are some tough opponents, the Tampa Bay Lightning, of course, but the Flames as well are a pretty decent team. The Ducks, not so much, but still, Dell really making a case for himself to, I guess, get the majority of the starts here for the rest of the year. I mean, he really has already taken up that mantle, especially since every time Jones gets a game just here or there to maybe be given a chance to try and take something back, he just doesn't do very well at all. I brought up the question in that Tampa Bay review whether or not the Sharks would try to re-sign Dell, but really what Dell is doing is just making a good case for himself to not necessarily be back with the Sharks, but to be with a different team. We saw a goaltender like Robin Lehner, who was playing not great with the Buffalo Sabres, but it looked like there was some potential there, so the Islanders took a chance on him, gave him a 1-year deal, and he ended up just passing with flying colors, ended up getting a deal with the Chicago Blackhawks, and he should be on the long term with some team soon enough, because his seasons with the Islanders and the Blackhawks have been so good. So I'm sure Dell will try and aim for something similar to that, get a 1-year deal with either the Sharks if they want to try and keep that, or with some other team, and try and prove his worth, because he has been very, very good for the Sharks for the past month plus. Next, I'll talk about Letunov and Alex True, both these players making their NHL debut in tonight's game just due to the injury to Joel Shelman, as well as the fact that Suomela was, oddly enough, healthy scratched, who I thought Suomela was pretty good against the Lightning, but I guess giving a chance to these rookies. The Sharks are without their first-line center, their second-line center, and now their fourth-line center, so the center depth is pretty thin, so bringing up Letunov and True, both centermen, is not the worst idea in the world. Now, both these players didn't have bad games. In fact, they were, I would say, net positive on the ice, but none really stood out incredibly. I thought Letunov maybe had a couple of good plays. He had probably the best chance for the Sharks in the first period, though that's not saying much. True himself also had a couple decent chances, one in particular in the third period, I guess, sort of stood out. But as has been the case for basically all of the Sharks' younger players who have stepped into the lineup here, except maybe Shellman, but he could also be included in that, is that they really haven't made much of an impact, I should say forwards, because I guess Ferraro has been pretty good on the defensive side. But forward-wise, the Sharks' young players who have stepped in haven't really made much of an impact, and Letunov and True really don't stray away from that. Next, I'll talk about Carlson, and this is Erik Carlson, of course. And normally when Carlson is on the board, I'll talk about whether or not he had a fantastic game or a poor game, and this will usually pertain to his defense. But what I want to talk about when it comes to Erik Carlson is something a bit different. Now, we know how fantastic Carlson is and when it comes to the offensive side of the game, and he has some of the best passing in the world. It's something that he's been constantly praised for over his career, and he has that fantastic pass to Mike Hoffman in the playoffs a couple of years ago against the Boston Bruins. And we've seen Carlson's passing on display even for the Sharks. Just a couple games ago, he had that great pass to Patrick Marleau to give him his second goal of the game. But something that I have been seeing a lot from Erik Carlson, that he's passing on good opportunities to shoot in favor of, well, passing the puck. And it happened, I believe, a couple of times here tonight. I believe it even happened in the previous night against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And it's not something I want to continue seeing, just because the Sharks, with Couture and Hertl both out, they are quite thin offensively in the forward side, really only with Meier and Kane carrying the majority of the load as the top six, with sort of Thornton and Marleau there as well. We need Carlson and Burns to step up offensively if the Sharks want to actually be able to win. And we saw Burns get a goal here tonight, but Carlson just seems to be not necessarily hesitating, but maybe a bit too generous with the puck. I would just like to see him actually take these shots more. Yes, I know if the pass does succeed, it's a pretty easy tap-in, but there's so many variables when it comes to passing the puck compared to just taking a shot. And as Wayne Gretzky, I guess, says with that famous quote, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So Carlson not taking this shot and going for the pass instead, if that pass doesn't work out, there's a 0% chance of you score. But if you take this shot from Carlson, with the amount of unpredictability that there is in hockey, there's actually a pretty decent chance that this could at least result in something happening, a scoring chance at the very least. And finally, I'll talk about Joe Thornton, not necessarily his game tonight, which was okay, but the fact that he put up a couple of assists, which actually puts him at the 1,500 point mark, which is obviously a very, very huge milestone for any NHL player. I believe he is the 14th player to hit 1,500 points in his career. Just extremely impressive. The 101st, I guess I should say, best player in NHL history, according to the NHL. But Thornton has had a fantastic career. He hasn't necessarily gotten to where he really wanted to get with the Stanley Cup, but he's made a Stanley Cup Finals. He's won a Hart Memorial. He's won an Art Ross, and he just continues to put up very, very good numbers. Certainly will go down as one of the best players in NHL history when he finally does retire, whether that's at the end of this season or a further season. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Thursday. They will face off against the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers were in action tonight. They got shut out by the Arizona Coyotes, which is never really a good thing when a team gets shut out the night before that they play you. But we'll see how the Sharks actually perform against the Oilers. They do have a couple of games here, and it's gone either way with the Oilers, so we'll see what the result is then. Class dismissed.